Most welcome to Historiespanarna, History Reconnaissance. This is 3 weeks in December 1941. Threats real and imagined in the weeks following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Dawn, December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. The US Navy base is suddenly attacked by hundreds of bombers, torpedo planes and fighters. The first bombs fall at 7:48 a.m. The assaulting force comes from the 6 aircraft carriers of the Kido Butai, the mobile force of the Japanese Navy, positioned 230 miles north of Oahu. In addition to the carriers, the Kido Butai consisted of 2 battleships, 2 heavy cruisers, 9 destroyers, 8 oil tankers and 23 submarines. It had left Japan on November 26th and sailed 4,000 miles under radio silence, undetected to within striking distance of the Hawaiian Islands. The planning for the attack began almost a year earlier as a brainchild of Admiral Yamamoto. The man who was instrumental in turning his vision into reality was Staff Officer Minoru Genda. He perfected the coordination of multiple aircraft carriers, the use of shallow water torpedoes and low-level bombing. Tora, 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 transmitted from the strike leader. Total surprise is achieved. The attack lasted 90 minutes, leaving 2,403 dead and 1,178 wounded Americans. 19 ships and hundreds of aircraft damaged or destroyed. The Japanese losses were 64 killed and 29 aircraft lost.
From the NBC newsroom in New York, President Roosevelt said in a statement today that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii from the air. I'll repeat that. President Roosevelt says that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii from the air.
The planned third wave of attack on Pearl Harbor was cancelled, and the strike force turned back. Fear of American air attacks, increased anti-aircraft fire from the ground in Pearl, and shortage of fuel are some of the reasons explaining the early withdrawal. The strike force headed north, then west towards the Japanese mainland. Then the ships of the Kido Butai continued on a grand tour of the Western Pacific, supporting the Japanese offensives. The revoked third attack wave saved the oil storage tanks, submarine base and workshops from destruction. Out of harm's way was also the 3 US Pacific Fleet aircraft carriers. The Saratoga was furthest away in San Diego after an overhaul. Closer to Pearl Harbor were the 2 other carriers. Dawn, September 7th, found the Enterprise 230 miles west of Oahu, returning after ferrying aircraft to Wake Island. Lexington was 500 miles southeast of Midway, turning back towards Oahu.
Back in New York City, here's a bulletin. Honolulu, Japanese bombs killed at least 5 persons and injured many others, 3 seriously, in a surprise morning aerial attack today on Honolulu. The sky was filled with puffs of smoke from exploding shells fired by American Army and Navy anti-aircraft units. Whether surface vessels of the United States fleet were in action against the enemy could not be learned at once. but columns of water rising from the sea as shells hit the water indicated a naval action. Viewed from the hills back of Honolulu, where many city folk went to view the fight, columns of heavy black smoke went skyward from Pearl Harbor. And Washington. Senate leaders were preparing today for an emergency session tomorrow in anticipation of a message from President Roosevelt asking for a declaration of war against Japan. And San Francisco. The Army and Navy went on a war basis on the Pacific seaboard today. All leaves were canceled, all furloughs revoked, and every man was ordered to report to his station. The commandant of the 3 naval districts on the West Coast appealed by every medium for every officer and man to report to his post. The commander of harbor defenses ordered all coast artillery officers and soldiers of the harbor defenses are ordered to report to their stations immediately. All leaves and furloughs are canceled by order of the commanding general. Close. Another bulletin, the Secretary of War has just announced that all military personnel on active duty is to appear Monday in uniform.
December 13th. Having failed to come close to the Lexington-class carriers, the 9 Japanese Type A1 and B1 submarines remaining in Hawaiian waters received detailed orders from the Imperial General Headquarters through Vice Admiral Mitsumi Shimizu. They were forwarded to Rear Admiral Sato aboard flagship submarine I-9, responsible for executing the orders. Each of the 9 submarines was assigned a specific destination, based on pre-war intelligence to give the best opportunities to attack American merchantmen in the shipping lanes. Then, on the night of December 25th, shell targets on land with 30 shells per submarine. The I-9 and I-10 was of type A1 and the others of type B1. The A1 type, built in the 1930s, was equipped to serve as squadron flagships. The B1 type was the most recent, built in the 1940s. Armament was similar for the 2 types. 6 internal bow 21-inch torpedo tubes, 1 5.5-inch deck gun, 2 1-inch anti-aircraft guns in either single or twin mount. They also carried a seaplane in a hangar integrated with a conning tower, a Yokosuka E-14Y with folding wings that was launched by catapult and retrieved with a collapsible aircraft crane. The E-14Y was mainly used as a reconnaissance seaplane, but it could carry a light bomb load. The stage is set, the cast is in place, and war arrives to the US Pacific coast. An hour before dawn, the first mate lieutenant of the Samoa sees a light approaching. He yells to the captain, "A submarine is attacking us!" Captain Sinnes orders the crew to lifeboat stations. Submarine I-17 fired several shells that didn't do much damage. Captain Nishino of the I-17 then fires a torpedo that passes beneath Samoa before exploding. Visibility is extremely poor. An I-17 leaves the scene, believing Samoa is sinking. She is not, and heads for San Diego at daybreak. Now, the I-17 got a second chance with the tanker Emido. Captain Farrow tried in vain to outrun the submarine, then ordered an SOS sent, and radio operator Foos added, under attack from enemy sub. Immediately, the I-17 opened up with its deck gun. Lifeboats were launched while the firing continued. Most of the crew abandoned the ship and rowed away. To the surprise of the men, the I-17 quickly submerged. The reason was soon obvious. 2 US bombers came roaring in from the coast, and depth charges were dropped. The relief was short. I-17 was not damaged, and the Emido crew saw from their lifeboats a periscope pushing up above the surface. and then a torpedo fired from 200 yards struck the Emedo. The radio operator, now back on the ship, sent another SOS and torpedoed in the stern. After rowing for 16 hours, 31 survivors were rescued by a Coast Guard lightship. The Emedo didn't sink. It drifted 85 miles until hitting rocks near Crescent City, California. The tanker Montebello is attacked by I-21. A torpedo hits with a big blast, and the captain orders to abandon ship. 8 to 10 shells are fired from the submarine, and splinters rain down on the lifeboats. Miraculously, no one is wounded. The I-21 then machine-gunned them, but they are saved by the poor visibility. The submarine retired, and 6 hours later the lifeboats, leaking from bullet holes, were caught in the surf and washed up on a beach near the town of Cambria. Only a local newspaper reported the sinking. Others were not allowed to spread the bad news. Before torpedoing the Emedo, the I-21 had failed to sink 2 tankers, the H.M. Story and the Larry Doheny. The I-19, having missed the lumber schooner Barbara Olson, found the freighter Absaroka, hitting it with 2 torpedoes. An SOS had been sent, and bombers soon appeared in pursuit of the sub. The patrol boat USS Amethyst also arrived on the scene, and continued with a pattern of 32 depth charges. The I-19 still got away. The Absaroka was towed and beached near Fort MacArthur with the help of a Navy tug. In Life magazine, movie actress Jane Russell is seen standing in the huge hole in Absaroka's hull caused by the torpedo. She is holding a poster. A slip of the lip may sink a ship. US merchant ships were sunk and damaged during these December weeks in 1941. The effect was probably less than anticipated by the Japanese Navy planners. The plan to shell coastal cities and lighthouses on Christmas Eve was first postponed to December 27th, then cancelled by the combined fleet headquarters in Tokyo. The fuel reserves on the ice submarines were running low, and US anti-submarine defenses was reported becoming very severe. There was also a fear that civilian losses would provoke American retaliation. This type of attack on the US Pacific coast with many Japanese submarines was not repeated. Only a few isolated attacks occurred the following years. The B-1 submarines continued to fight and sink US ships in the Pacific. They had an impressive range and size. On the other hand, their dive time was slow and operative depth relatively shallow. This made them more and more vulnerable to the improving anti-submarine weapons. By 1944, all of the 9 ice submarines attacking in this narrative was sunk and removed from the Imperial Japanese Navy list, their crews resting under the waves of the Pacific. The threat to the Pacific coast was for real. How about the East Coast and New York? On December 9th, air raid alarms sounded. Pedestrian and traffic continued as normal. Surely it was a mistake. The next day it was, read all about it. Big headlines of the alarm and even a report of a plane fleet heading for the city. 2 days later, Germany and Italy declared war on USA. December 9th was a false alarm, but it got people thinking, and someone on Life magazine went all in with a story of a hypothetical air raid on New York. A token air raid it was labeled. It assumed that the German Kriegsmarine aircraft carrier Graf Zeppelin could come within range of the US East Coast and launch a raid with 40 bombers targeting New York. An estimated number of casualties, fires started and buildings destroyed as a result of the raid was also specified. All this assuming the carrier and its escort could replicate the December 7th sneak attack and take New York and its air defenses by surprise. This never happened. The Graf Zeppelin was never operational or even completed, and remained in the Baltic Sea, finally sunk in a Soviet weapons test after the war. The real threat was under the surface. German submarines were already on their way. They called the period that began in January the following year the American shooting season. Many hundreds of merchant ships were sunk. An American historian called it America's second Pearl Harbor. Well, that is beyond the scope of our story. 3 weeks in December 1941.
That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.